Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Mikhail's grandpa. My name is Doug Clayson. When I was a little boy, they called me Brownie. Because my dad always wore brown suits to school, and then they called me Brownie Jr. That's the way I got my name. I was born June the 8th, 1932. I was born at home. I wasn't born in the hospital. The doctor came to the house and delivered me.
So where did you grow up? Can you tell us about the town that you grew up in?
I grew up in Santa Quin my whole life. There were no oiled roads. Everything was just a gravel road. We lived on a gravel road.
Can you tell us about like your parents? Like what did your mom and dad do?
Okay.
Who were your siblings?
My dad, when I was first a little child, he was the music teacher at the junior high. They had lived in Goshen, but they moved to Santa Quin because he was going to be the music teacher. He also taught math and some other classes, but mainly music. My mother, as a child, she got what they called then St. Vitus dance, but it was a dramatic art. And that was, she missed, I think it was most of the 5th grade school because she couldn't write, she couldn't do anything. And finally, somehow they got it corrected to a point that she went back to school and she caught up with her class and everything, but then when she was in the 6th grade, I think, or 7th grade, she never did go to high school. I think that was when my grandma got sick and she had to stay home and take care of her.
Do you know how your parents met?
Yes. My dad, he graduated with what was called a normal diploma of some sort with only 2 years of schooling. And so he had started to teach music, and at that time he was teaching music in Santa Quin and he needed somebody to play the piano for it. He did a lot of operetta kind of shows and things at Christmas time and different things. And so he was trying to find somebody that could play the piano well. And he found my mother that she could play very well. And so that's how they got started going together. They got married, and all he had was a 2-year college degree, but he wound up being the principal of a mining town up in Carbon County. It was called Spring City. He and Mother, I remember when I was younger, took me up there and showed me where they lived. Very, very primitive, it's kind of in a deep canyon. There were just shacks on either side. But the mining company owned some houses that they let the workers stay in, and for their honeymoon, they went up there, and they had to share a house with. My mother said he was Greek. He didn't speak English, and she said I sat there and cried the first night because I thought, oh, I can't live like this. When I was little, my dad played in dance orchestras. He'd played his whole life. He was very, very good. And he had an orchestra of his own, but at this time, he was playing with, his name was Ralph Malachi in Price. And my dad was supposed to meet the orchestra in Spanish Fork to drive up Spanish Fork Canyon. Well, there was we used to call it the Orem, a train that ran from, I think it was from Salt Lake to Payson. The track was there. But anyway, my dad he was supposed to catch that in order to meet the orchestra in Spanish Fork. On the way, his car got a flat tire, and he couldn't go in his car. He caught this old train that was called the Orem, and it ran into a pig and derailed, and he missed the orchestra, and they went without him, and they had a big accident, and 2 guys were killed in the car, which was good for my dad.
Yeah.
My grandpa Hudson, it's a long story, but he wound up leaving home when he was about 13 or 14 years old. He had a stepmother that threw all their family records in the fireplace, and originally he was born in Lehigh, but they moved to Spring City. The Brigham Young sent them to Spring City, my great-grandfather. And anyway, Grandpa Hudson left home. His dad, I think he said he gave him $1.50, all the money he had. His dad understood the problem because his stepmother was mean to the kids, and he wound up in Santaquin working for the bishop, who was the bishop. And there's a lot of interesting stories about that. And the bishop had a daughter that he was kind of interested in, and he wanted to take her out, and it was a little different in those days about you had to get dressed up and make a formal proposal and everything. The first time he tried to make a date with her, she dumped a bucket of water on his head from the upstairs, and he went away. But then later he came back, and anyway, I should tell you a story. His first experience with her, really after they started going together, they went for a buggy ride once, and it was up in the hills, and anyway, there was something that happened to the horses, and they ran away with the buggy, and he had to get up. He crawled up and got up, and so he could hold the bridle of the horses, and anyway, but in the process, he unhooked the horses and he got drugaways, and when he got drugged, he didn't realize it, but he'd lost his pants. And Grandma, she said she had a shawl or something, and she wrapped that around him, and they went back home, and she said after that they were very good friends.
Tell us a little bit about your Grandpa Hudson. I know he was a big influence
My
in your
Grandpa
life.
Hudson never
As a
played
little boy.
a musical instrument, but he wanted all his kids to be musicians. He grew up in Spring City, where his father had a theater that they had dances and everything, dances and movies, or well, they weren't movies then, but different social events. And so when Grandpa finally became more prosperous, he was probably the most wealthy man in Santaquin. He homesteaded a homestead up on the foothills of Santaquin, and he also raised horses, and he raised all kind of fruit and apples and everything. And he would have a big party for everybody in Santaquin on Christmas time and give everybody a present. But anyway, he built a place like his dad had that's right next to where I grew up. I called it the Miners Union Hall because he had sold it to the miners that were in Eureka, and that's where they had their union meetings and everything. And anyway, all these kids learned to play musical instruments. My mother, she played in the tabernacle organ when she was 3 years old. And had her picture in the paper. She was a very good piano player. When my grandpa grew up, he lived through the Black Hawk Indian War, and he had Indian friends. But I remember he told me the story. He could speak a little bit of that language too, but he told me the story about how when the war started, he was on a horse riding up this hill, and on the other side of the hill, an Indian came over the hill, and they were having a war. And he says, we both just turned our horses around and ran the other way. But one day when I think I was only, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8, we had a big front door, but no one ever came to the front door. They came to the side door. But then we had a back door that had a porch on the back, and we called it the summer kitchen, and it was a different, it's not there anymore in that house. but there was a knock that came at the back door. We went to the door and it was an Indian. And I remember he had a feather in his hair, and you could tell he was an Indian. And he said, "Is Will here?" My grandpa, his name was William Albert Hudson, and he knew him as Will. And so we went and got Grandpa, and they hugged each other, and you'd have thought they were long lost friends, and they talked a little bit Indian talk, and anyway he left, and they were boyhood friends when they were little.
Where did your grandpa learn Indian?
Well, he grew up, he was born in Lehigh, but he grew up as a child in Spring City, and there were a lot. If you ever go to Spring City, it's a very pioneerish town. You can find a lot of old homes and things, but that's where he had a lot of Indian friends. And
Tell a little bit about your grandma Hudson. She was
My
kind of a
grandma
doctor in
Hudson.
town, right?
she, before I was born, she'd had some kind of a death approach that she really prayed about to recover. And anyway, she decided to be, she was almost like a trained doctor. When I was a little kid, she would take her little black bag and go around, and she would nurse anybody who was sick. I remember her taking angleworms and milking all the mud out of an angleworm to take to people for iron, and she did that her whole life. She promised Heavenly Father if she didn't die, she would help other people, so that's what she did. She was an interesting lady. But she and Grandpa, we moved in, well, I was very little, and we lived in one side of the house and they lived in the other side, but we all ate together in the same room, and had a big coal stove that was great to make toast on. You could always find the right spot on that stove for toast, and pop popcorn, and in the wintertime put your feet in the oven, and at night I slept upstairs in an upstairs room that there would be ice on the windows, so I would I'd always heat flat irons on the stove and put them in a little corduroy bag and take to bed with me at night to put at my feet. And that's the way I kept warm, because there was no heat up there. Later on, my dad got a little oil stove that we put upstairs, but when I was little, it was freezing cold up there. Well, Grandma got hit with a car. It was a Relief Society meeting and Mother had to go someplace and play piano, and Grandma was going to walk home, and she crossed the road, and a truck, it was during the Ute Stampede, when there was a lot of, the main street came right through Santa Quinn, and the guy had his arm out the window and hit her in the chest, and she had a punctured lung. She went to the doctor, and I suppose now they could have done something, but she died. Grandma was about 80 when she was killed, and Grandpa was just about a year older than her, and he lived with us till he was 94. And one day at the table, we were all sitting there, and I remember he had a kind of a startled look on his face. He had never had a childhood disease, ever. Nothing was wrong with him, ever. So he did break his leg once when he was a kid, and they said it, and it wasn't done by a doctor, but they set his leg. But anyway, we were sitting at the table, and he had kind of a strange look on his face, and I remember he said, "Pass the potatoes," and I passed him the potatoes. I was sitting right next to him, and he just slumped over and died right there.
Can you tell us a little bit about your siblings? You had 2 sisters, is that right?
I did.
Yeah.
Galia was 5 years older than me. Cheryl was 14 years younger than me. Well, Galia, she bossed me around an awful lot. When you're a little boy, you get bossed around by your big sister. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day, I've told you, Dad, this story. My grandpa had a big scythe that he would go out and cut the grass and the weeds and things with his full-size scythe. And one day, I can't remember what the argument was about, but my sister, I just got so mad at her, I got that scythe, and I took after her, and I was gonna chop her up with that scythe. We had one door on the side of the house. That door is gone now, it's been blocked up. But she ran in the house and locked that door, and I took that scythe and I cut the screen door to pieces. And when my dad came home, it was kind of interesting. He didn't really get too mad at me because he knew that she'd picked on me somehow, I don't know. We had a big granary that had no electricity, no lights, and it was dark. But on the side of the wall, she put a piece of cardboard, and it was all the rules for me. This is what happens if you do this, and this is what happens if you do that. And those rules, they were still there for years and years, and they might still be in there. It's a dark old granary, but I remember she wrote down what my punishment and everything.
What were some things you enjoyed doing as a kid?
Oh, in the wintertime, there was a big hill in Santa Quinn that we called the sleigh riding hill, and that was always fun to take your sleigh and run and slam and go down this hill, and it was always exciting because the girls and the boys, and then you'd think the girls didn't like this, but they did. When the girls would take off and go, and then the boys would take off and go and try and catch them and flip them off their sleigh. That was the big deal.
What were your sleighs made out of?
They were just wooden slayers. What did they call those? Flyer that you could guide. And, yeah. We thought it would be fun to take a bucket of apples and go. There were big ditches that ran down the side of Santa when the water came, big cement ditch. And we thought, well, we'll just take a bucket of apples and we'll throw a Carson. And then we'll just lay in the ditch and they would never know what happened. There were 3 of us, I remember, and
How old were you?
I probably 6 or 7, big enough to throw apples.
Yeah.
But I remember we threw the apple, and we didn't realize it was the cop, though. It was the cop who we threw the at, and he'd come right over. He knew right where we were. We were laying there on our back in the ditch. And he said, "Okay, boys, come on." He got us in the car and took us to jail. And we cried, we were bawling. And back then, the bars in the museum, they'd been painted white, but they were coal black when I got thrown in that jail. And we stayed there probably, I don't know, about 2 hours, and finally he came back, or at least it seemed like a long time to me, and he gave us a lecture and sent us home. I remember my first day of kindergarten, we had a big white picket fence in front of our house, a very nice fence. We painted that and took good care of it. But I didn't want to go to school. I'm not going, I don't want to go to school. And I remember going out there and just hanging on that fence post, and Mother says, "You've got to go to school." I said, "I'm not going to school." Anyway, we had a big argument, and finally she convinced me I had to go to school. So I went to school. On the back of our house, we had a little wooden table, and there was an old stove sitting there, when I was a very little kid, all our cesspools, waste from the house went to an old dry well. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that it was going to the dry well. Well, my dad got to the point he had to build a septic tank. And anyway, it was a new company. 2 guys just finished the Army, and they had started building cesspools, and that was their job. And anyway, my dad and some of the kids from school, they dug the hole, which was about, I don't know, about 8 or 10 feet long and 6 feet deep, and it was for a septic tank. Well, then this company came in, they made cement walls around it, and then when it was all finished, then they brought in the truck the lid to put on the septic tank. Have I ever told you this?
Mm-mm.
Not really? It was an interesting story for me. Anyway, they had a big tripod that was like 25 feet high, 3 legs, and then they had a crane to lift the lid to put on this. It was a big cement lid to put on the septic tank, and it weighed tons. And anyway, I was sitting on this little wooden table at the back of the house. I was about 6 years old, I think. And anyway, it was a very calm, it was a bright, sunny day, no breeze, no wind, the leaves in the trees just standing still. And anyway, they had hooked this big cement slab onto that to hoist and then swing it over and put it on the septic tank. Well, all of a sudden, a little breeze came up and something lit in my eye, and I flinched and just got up to get it out, and as I got up and left that table, that tripod fell over and smashed that table to pieces.
Wow.
And everybody was very quiet. Everybody just didn't say a thing. Me too.
Yeah.
Because if I'd have stayed on that table, I'd have been dead.
Yeah.
When I was very little, my dad bought me a little dog, and I still remember the little dog. It got rabies, and it was under the bed, and my dad, and it was foaming at the mouth, and I didn't know what to do. Anyway, my dad somehow got it, and he took it and got rid of it. But ever since then, I always had a dog. Never, even after we got married, I had a dog until just about almost until we moved here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story of the dummy?
Well, the dummy, he had lost his hearing totally. He was totally deaf. And we'd kind of play with him, and he was, we'd tease him a little bit. Sometimes we'd do something that made him mad, but I remember one time my friend had a friend that lived close by named Norman Higginson, and we got the dummy's hat. He had an old, kind of like a ball cap thing, and we got his hat, and we were throwing it back and forth, and when the dummy was getting mad, and he finally got mad, and he caught Norman and put his head between his legs and got a pocket knife out, and he started sharpening his pocket knife, and Norman's bawling and screaming, and he took his pocket knife and pulled on his ear, and he was going to cut his ear off. But he turned his knife backwards and sawed on it while Norman's bawling. Finally, the dummy let him go. We had a big board fence between us and the Miners Union Hall, and we could peek through a knot hole. We'd watch the dummy come, and he had a brick in that old Miners Union Hall that he could take the brick out, and he was hiding something in there all the time. We'd peek through the hole, and the dummy was hiding something there. So we decided we'll see what there is he's got hidden there. So one day we went over there and we took the brick out, and he had we called it snuff. I don't know. Anyway, it's tobacco that you sniff up your nose somehow. And anyway, we thought, well, we'll fool him. We'll dump that out and put wet sawdust in there and see how he likes that. So and sure enough, the next day he comes marching by, and we go peek in the knot hole through watch him, and he got that can out, and he looked at that, and he felt that, and I remember he just because that's all he and he knew who had done that too. He was mad at us after that. When I was, I don't know, I probably was maybe 11 years old, 10 or 11, and we had a neighbor. His name was Tommy Tuckett, and he constantly wanted to come and play with us, and he was only about 7 or 8. He was littler, kept telling him, no, we don't want to play with you, Tommy, but he would come over, he just pestered me. And I had another good friend whose name was Ross, I called him Tink, there were two of us, and we said, well, let's play a trick on him, and I remember I got Tink and put him in a gunny sack in the corner of the granary, and Tommy came over and he wanted to play, and I said, oh, I can't, I've got my crazy brother's in the granary there, and I have to take care of him. You don't have a crazy brother. I do have a crazy brother. Oh, I don't believe it. Well, I said, well, go in there and see. And so he went in there, and my friend jumped out of the sack and took up after him, and he ran home and didn't come back for a long time. I learned the facts of life by raising rabbits. I finally understood what was going on. But I had a lot of rabbits, and I raised rabbits, and we sold rabbits, and I bought my first shotgun with money from raising rabbits. But Tommy would always come over, and sometimes I'd take rabbit pellets, and I'd shoot a few rabbit pellets. And I'd tell him, oh, these are really pretty good, Tommy. And, oh, really? But you know, rabbit droppings are little round balls that kind of look like what we're feeding them. But so I said, you ought to try some here. I gave him a handful, and he chewed them up. he didn't. Finally, he understood what he was chewing wasn't rabbit food. It was rabbit poop. I remember. I can't remember really why, but I thought I was picked on for some reason. We had a big yard that had an orchard and a garden and everything up in the corner. But I told Mother I was going to leave. I felt like I was picked on, and so she packed me a lunch. Said, here's your lunch, and you'll probably, it's where you're going to go. I don't know, but I'm leaving. So I took off, and I went clear around the block, and came up in the corner, and came back in, and so I could see down at the house. And I thought, certainly she'll be out looking for me, won't she? Nobody ever came out. I couldn't understand. Finally, I had eaten the sandwiches, and I was sitting up there on the ditch bank, and nobody ever come looking for me. Well, I finally went home. I went home. When I was in the 5th grade, I had a good friend named Terrell Carter. And on the opening, I think it was the opening of the pheasant season, or the deer season. Anyway, he and his older brother, who I later became a friend with, were playing with their dad's rifle. And he got shot in the stomach and killed. And I remember going to school, and Terrell was dead, and it was a sad thing. Well, later on, I started going with his brother who shot him. But he was a little bit too wild for me. We hunted coyotes together. We caught some coyotes, not very many, but a few. But we'd be off up in the hills with a .22, and an airplane would fly over, and he'd shoot holes in the wings. And I'd say, Jimmy, one of these days, that's going to be a problem. There's going to be somebody find out, or that plane's going to come crashing down. I won't hurt it. But I could hear the bullets going through the wings, and I think, in town, I remember he was always such a reckless person. We had blasting caps that the miners used to set dynamite off with. We'd go, there were big cement culverts over ditches in Santa Quin, and you'd roll up a blasting cap in there and throw it under the bridge, and boom, and it makes a big noise. And sometimes, I remember he would set a fire, and went in the cheatgrass, and I said, Jimmy, we're not going to get this fire put out. Oh, we will too. But anyway, he was a wild kid. I finally quit playing with him. That old school building, there's an upstairs to it. And I was in the 5th grade class, and we had a lot of kids that are really troublemakers. And I think we were on our 3rd or 4th teacher. They all quit. The principal, he was a counselor in the state presidency and a pretty nice guy, but he had a bad temper too. But one day, the kids, it was kind of a joint operation at the time, I think. The teacher left the room, and it was one of the kind of doors that you could lock from the inside, and you had to have a key to get in from the outside. And I don't think the teacher had the key. I don't know what the deal was, but anyway, the kids locked her out. And she was down below, looking up at the window and saying, "You gotta let me in, I gotta get in." And the kids, we were all just standing at the window laughing, you know. And she said, "I'll get Mr. Rowe." Well, okay, we'll get Mr. Rowe. Well, she got Mr. Rowe, and he came and unlocked the door and walked in. Everybody's in their seat now. We're all sitting there very quiet. And he really had lost his temper. He grabbed this one kid who was he was a dumb kid anyway to start with. His name was Oliver Malcolm. And he picked him up. He wore overalls, and he picked him by the strap of his overalls and the back of his neck, and took him up to the blackboard. And this is not an exaggeration at all, but he just bam, 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 3 times his head against the blackboard. And then he took him back and slammed him in his seat.
What do you remember about World War II? What do you remember hearing about it?
Well, I remember very distinctly of when the war ended, taking my clarinet and going up and down the road playing the horn. It was a very big deal. I had a cousin who was shot up in the war terribly bad. He came home and was shell-shocked. He couldn't even hardly talk. He had a hard time talking. Just remember that we thought, when I was a kid, we thought, well, we're safe. They can't fly over these mountains. We'll be all right. No, there won't be any airplanes come here.
Can you tell us about high school? Where did you go to high school? What did you like to do?
Well, see, I went to junior high in Santa Quin, and then we rode the bus to Payson. When I was in junior high, I thought I was a great dancer, and I let my mother, she helped me learn how to dance, and that's when you did the Virginia Reel and the Schottish. But when I went to high school, oh man, those girls looked awfully old and mature. I was kind of scared of the girls, frankly. I don't think I went on one date in high school, ever. I thought the girls they're too fancy for me. But I remember one day that, I think, what was the Red Mill was the operetta that was being put on. And the real star, she was a good-looking junior or senior, and she could really sing, and she was pretty, and I had a solo on the saxophone in that little Red Mill thing. And then when I looked up, I was playing my solo, and she looked down at me and winked at me while I was playing, and I about choked on my saxophone. I played the saxophone, and we had the woman dance teacher every year. She put on a big dance festival, very fancy, all the girls, big fancy dances. And I got out of school for 2 weeks because I played in the dance orchestra. And that was a great time for me because I didn't have to even go to school for 2 weeks. We just practiced that all the time. When I first started playing for dances, I got $2 a dance. That's when I was a little boy. But then it got so it was more, and more, and a little bit more. Awesome. I remember when I was probably 14, I started playing for dances, but I got with, back then, musicians, they all were, you had to drink and smoke. I had high school friends or that were older, and I thought, I don't want to do this. So I started my own orchestra. My cousin could play the piano very well, and I had 2 friends, one that played the trombone, one that played the trumpet, and then we scrounged around for a drummer. Anyway, that's how I got started. My mother wanted me to call it Doug and the Four Diggers, but I said, no, I can't do that. But we were called the Friendly Five, and we traveled all around southern Utah. And that's how I got started. Finally, this orchestra in Nephi, he got me to come and play with them, and I played with them before I went on my mission. When I came back, they had me come and play again, and then finally we were playing a lot in Richfield and Salina, and it was just too far. This is when I was married, and so I quit and played in nightclubs in Salt Lake instead.
Can you tell us about your mission? When did you get your call? What were your thoughts when you got your call?
When it came, at that time, they weren't letting missionaries go, so it was kind of an interesting thing that I even got a call to go on a mission. I think I was 21 years old, and there was no missionaries going because of the war in Korea. But I got a mission call to go to Hawaii, and I didn't know. I thought, well, that's great. Anyway, so I wound up going to Hawaii.
How did you get there?
On a boat, 5 days on the Lurleen. It was, I wound up, when I got there, being the companion of the district president on Maui, and he was 65 years old. And I remember, oh man, I worried about it. He took me out tracting, and I was so nervous. I thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this or not. But anyway, I was the district president's companion, and I had only been there about 5 months, maybe less than that, and his wife was able to come. So I got sent back to Honolulu while his wife was there. And when I got sent back, I was the senior companion to another elder that was new. And we did hard missionary work, and I got used to being turned away and told to get out of here and everything else. And we were very successful. We had, I think I had 9 baptisms. It was very good. More success than I thought I should have had.
Did you learn to speak Hawaiian?
I could converse a little bit, but I could not preach the gospel. Our second counselor in the mission presidency, he thought I was better than I was because he would come and visit Maui and take me to the hospitals when he went to visit sick people. And I could talk to them like that, but it was interesting. There was an old lady who made me a quilt that I never did get because I left before she got it finished, but she could not speak English at all. And one day, I think I told Scott this, there was a guy who borrowed her genealogy and never returned it. And boy, she was mad. And she came to me, and in her Hawaiian English, the word bullshit kept cropping up. I had to smile because, she was trying to express how dissatisfied she was with this guy that had her genealogy. And she was very nice to me, though. She told me that she was my grandma and that she was making this quilt for me, and I never did get it.
So when you came home from your mission, did you go to school, or what was the next step?
I remember right after I came home from my mission, I had to have some money somehow. I had a friend, his name was Cyrus Byland, who he and his brother-in-law sold cookware. And after you've been a missionary for a while, you'll try anything, door to door. And he said, oh, you can make money selling cookware. So I decided I'll sell cookware. So I traveled around with these guys selling cookware.
Where did you go to college?
BYU all the time. Lived in a lady's basement for $25 a month. And it looked like it was that's about what it was worth too.
What did you study?
I was gonna be a music teacher, but gosh, there were so many dinky classes, and harmony was not an easy class either, that I just wound up being a school teacher.
Did you work while you were in school?
Played for a lot of dances.
Okay, where was your first job out of college?
I got a job, well, I worked all the time in the summers at Del Monte Cannery. I always worked in the summer to try and get enough money to go to school, but my first teaching job was supposed to be in Nebo. I had a contract for Nebo, but then something happened. I could start in the middle of the year in Alpine. Well, I could start, it was April Fool's Day I started. And I could start in April and then have a contract for the next year too, so I did that. I had a hard time convincing that when the photographer came to take pictures, he thought there was a tall girl in the 6th grade and he thought she was the teacher. And I said, I'm the teacher.
How did you meet your wife?
It was my first year of teaching school, and I was very good friends with these other guys, and anyway, the one guy got a student teacher from BYU. She was this little short, cute little girl. I thought, well, she's way too short for me, and, anyway. And he said, oh, why don't you take her out? She's really nice. Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay, so I took Orlean. She was his student teacher. One of the very first dates we went on, we went to Utah Lake. You went down to the lake and watched the waves come in, and everything. And I remember going, and she said, don't you need gas? And she had to go to the bathroom. So we went and got gas, and she went to the bathroom. And anyway, but it was after that I decided I liked her, and so, but her missionary was going to come home, and that's when I asked her, because I knew if he came home that probably was the end of that. I remember when we got engaged, we went and picked the ring out together, which I thought was fine. And then when I gave it to her, I picked her up one night, and she said something about the ring, and I says, oh, it's in the junk box, get it out. That wasn't a very romantic way of giving her a ring, but that's what happened.
So she took the ring out. Did she put it on herself?
Took the ring out and put it on.
What made you want to marry her? How did you know?
Just, I don't know, just could tell that was the one. She was really quite a leader. She really, I remember our very first date I ever went with, well, not that was to the movie, but when I went to BYU, we to a band party, and I was taking her, and went in, and they had a Congo line going, and I've told you that story maybe.
I want to hear it though.
She hooked on the end of the line, and I just stood there. I wasn't going to hook onto the end of that line. And then all the others said, hey, Orlean, you lost somebody. She was a very, very good clarinet player, better than I was. I wish I could find, she played Rhapsody in Blue on the clarinet with the symphony orchestra from BYU, and it was fantastic.
Tell us about your wedding day. Where did you get married? What do you remember about the day?
We were married in the Logan Temple, and I remember distinctly what, that, of course our parents and everything were there, and we got married in the Logan Temple, and coming down, they ran out of gas right at the top of before you get to Manaway Reservoir, ran out of gas there, and I thought, holy cow, what do we do now? I coasted all the way down and got to a service station in Brigham. And that's where we spent our first night, was in Brigham.
Did you have a reception?
Oh yeah. And her returned missionary came to the reception
Where was your reception at?
in her church
In Ogden?
in Ogden. Yeah, it was a church that Grandpa Mayberry had built.
Can you tell us about starting a family and some of your favorite memories with your family?
Well, we never discussed a lot about having children. We just had children, that's all. I remember when Kyle was just a baby. I remember he would lay there so still. I'd think, is he dead? I'd go poke him. And he'd stir. I'd think, oh, I'm glad he's not dead.
Did you know that you wanted to have a big family?
Yeah, we thought 6 kids would be nice. They all turned out much better than their parents. That's true. Yeah.
You had some
It
good
is.
kids.
Yeah, they are very good kids, all of them. All our vacations were camping vacations. That's the kind we could afford. And then most of the friends we had, that's the kind of vacations they could have.
And you were a teacher. Did you do any other jobs on the side?
Played for music a lot. Did a lot of other jobs. We did a lot of jobs to survive. Always had some kind of job extra because school teaching, we would have starved to death. And it all worked out pretty well, actually.
Tell us what you appreciated most about Grandma Clayson. What did you admire about her? What did you feel was good about her?
She was probably the driving force in our family, actually. A lot of times I'd say, oh, no, let's not do that. Well, we're going to do that. You would have never had music lessons if it hadn't been for her.
Once all your kids were grown up, you served a mission together.
Uh-huh.
Where did you go?
To Korea. We tried to learn Korean, but Korean is impossible to learn unless you get more involved in it than that. It was very hard, but we learned Korean to work in the temple.
What are some of the most important life lessons you've learned?
Oh, probably just never give up. Be like what President Hinckley said, things will work out. They usually do. Even now, there are times I get so I got something I cannot do, and yet I figure out a way to do it. And that's the way life is. You can figure it out, and things will work out. You a movie producer?
She does really good
kinda.
I'll
videos.
tell you, you start out when I was just a baby. I remember nothing about that,
Okay.
and I remember nobody telling me anything.
We just have to have as little noise as possible.
And no
All right.
laughing,
No laughing.
no gagging either. I looked him up later on, and he became some kind of a government official later on. But he's dead now too. He died. Everybody I knew is dead now.
That's funny.
Everybody always had to take a nap. You rolled out. Did you have to take a nap when you went to kindergarten?
We didn't.
Well, we took
I
naps,
did.
but I remember the teacher. She'd walk by, and I'd look up under her dress, and I'd think, I bet she doesn't know what I know. It was funny. She was and I liked her. She was a good teacher.
Thanks for sharing this with us.
You've got a lot of stuff that you don't need. You're welcome to edit most of that out.